With their backs against the wall, the Idaho Steelheads won back-to-back games in Texas, earning the right to come back home, but there's still work to do as they look to keep their Kelly Cup dreams alive. Live from CenturyLink Arena, this is the 2018 U.S. Bank Kelly Cup Playoffs, Game 6 of the Mountain Division Semifinals between the Idaho Steelheads and the Allen Americans. And good evening, everyone. Great to have you with us. Brian McCormick here with you. Will Hall will join us throughout the evening as well. For the Idaho Steelheads, they did what they had to do against a very steep mountain to climb and very difficult odds to overcome against this Allen Americans team that has won 15 of their last 16 playoff series. The Idaho Steelheads won back-to-back games, games 4 and 5 at Allen Event Center. They are back on home ice and hoping to continue the dream and do what very few teams have ever been able to do in the ECHL. And for the Steelheads, they feel at their best right now as opposed to any other time in this series. They're playing their best defensive hockey. They're locking things down, and the Allen Americans got away from their game plan a little bit in games 4 and 5. They're looking to center in and hone in on their focus here for game 6. So take a look at our storylines tonight. And for the Idaho Steelheads, is it going to be a historic comeback? And that's in more ways than one. For the Steelheads, they're looking to become just the second team in ECHL history to overcome a 3-0 series deficit. The last team, the only team to do it, the Cincinnati Cyclones back in 2010. They did so in the Eastern Conference Final. They would go on to beat the Steelheads in the Kelly Cup Final. Only 2 teams, aside from that 2010 Cincinnati Cyclones team, have come back to force a Game 7 after trailing 3-0 in a series. It was the 2003 Cincinnati Cyclones and the 2015 Toledo Walleye. Both teams did so in a conference final. Both teams would lose in 7. So for the Steelheads, just getting to Game 7, history and probability are against them, but this is a team playing again its best hockey of this series and matching their style of play of the last 9 or 10 games of the regular season, much more so now than they did in the first 3 games of this series. And for that, they feel much more confident. They feel like they've gotten much more back to their identity as opposed to the loose style they were playing in games 1, 2, and 3. They're going to see if they can carry that over after the travel day yesterday from Texas here to Idaho, if they can maintain that momentum. Second storyline, well, for the Steelheads, comebacks, they pertained not just to the series, but to the games individually as well, as the Idaho Steelheads in each game in this series have given up the first goal. All 5 games, they've trailed 1-0. In games 4 and 5, they're able to overcome that. 2-1 win on Friday in game 4, and a 2-1 win Sunday in game 5 as well, despite trailing 1-0 going into the first intermission. And for a little bit of context, this is an Allen Americans team this year that won 26 games and lost only 6 in regulation when they scored the first goal. They won 24 games and lost only 4 in regulation when they led after 20 minutes. So this is an Americans team that has been relatively automatic when taking a 1-0 lead or a 2-0 lead, or any lead for that matter, into the intermission. The Steelheads overcame those odds twice in a row to keep this series going, and they hope they can do that again heading into this evening, but also that they could perhaps score first themselves and give themselves some better odds, a little bit more energy in the early going of this contest. Third storyline, one of the reasons the Steelheads have been able to come back in the last 2 games is because goaltender Philippe DeRosier is rolling. After he took the crease back from Thomas Scholl in game 1 and could not get the win, Thomas Scholl returned for games 2 and the first half of game 3 before he was relieved by DeRosier, and ever since DeRosier came in midway through game 3, he has been dominant ever since. He's given up 3 goals since that point, stopping 79 of 82 shots, including 21 of 21 in the 3rd period on Sunday, protecting a 1-goal lead. And you know what? He's tacking out on the offense too. For the Steelheads, not scoring a whole lot in the last 2 games, but still finding ways to win. Philippe DeRosier had an assist in game 4 and in game 5, the first Steelheads goaltender ever to notch multiple points in the same postseason. So Philippe DeRosier doing everything right, and fans are quick to forget, as good as Thomas Scholl was over the month of March, and he was the best goaltender in the ECHL during the month of March, he got that opportunity because Philippe DeRosier was called up to AHL Texas after he had started 10 consecutive games for the Steelheads and then came back for the playoffs to reclaim the crease. So Philippe DeRosier had his best professional season, 25 wins, ranked in the top 5 of the ECHL this year. He had a very strong season, and he's reminding fans of that with some strong play here in this series as well, helping the Steelheads get to game 6. Take a look at our Footsteps Photography team snapshots. Footsteps Photography, they're capturing life's ever-precious moments. Make sure you follow them on Facebook. Let them know the Steelheads sent you. Steelheads at 18.2% on the power play in this series, 4th best in the postseason. And for the Steelheads, they have scored a power play goal in 4 of 5 games in this series. The penalty kill at 87.5% ranks 7th in the ECHL. They've given up just 2 power play goals in this series. One of them came to David Mikowski in Game 5. Max French has been, for the Steelheads, one of the power play catalysts. He scored the game-winning goal in Game 5 with a 5-on-3 power play goal, and here we see his power play work in Game 2 as well. Both his goals in this series have come on the power play, and from that left wing side, Steelers will look to funnel the puck to him as much as they can when they are a man up. Let's go downstairs outside the Steelhead locker room where Will Hall's with a member of the Steelheads coaching staff. Go ahead, Will.
Thanks, Brian. Will, Neil, Allen has scored first in all 5 games so far in this series. What's the biggest key to changing that trend tonight?
Well, I think it's important that we get out and get pucks in deep early. Whether they do that or not, we have a 60-minute game plan. And I think that's kind of shown through in the last 2 games, and it's important to continue to evolve as the series progresses, and obviously getting the first goal will be something we want to do.
Speaking of the last 2 games, Rosie been stellar for you in between the pipes in those last 2, 68 saves, only giving up 2 goals. How much is the rest of the team feeding off his play right now? Yeah,
no, he's been great. I think it's important that we play, a 5-man unit in front of him and make sure we manage where the shots are coming from. And then he's done a nice job of controlling the rebounds, controlling the pace of the game with some whistles, and he's played well.
Neil, thanks for your time. Best of luck tonight.
Thank you.
Brian, we'll send it upstairs to you.
Thank you, Coach, and thank you, Will. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment when Neil Graham talked about the 5-man unit. Of course, it's self-explanatory, but just how well the Steelheads did of having a defensive structure in front of Philippe DeRosier, particularly in the 3rd period of Game 5. Take a look at the Allen side of our snapshots, and for the Allen Americans, their power play has struggled. It has been a story that Steve Martinson has talked about after games throughout. Only 2 power play goals for the Americans during this postseason. They rank near the bottom of the power play statistics. Their penalty kill has been better, but has been more opportunities as well. Their penalty kill at 81.8%. They've given up 1 goal in each of the 4 of the 5 games in this series, but they have at least kept the Steelheads from blowing the lid off the game at any point, as the Steelers have had some opportunities. David Mikowski works into that conversation in more ways than one. He is 2nd in the ECHL in voting for Defenseman of the Year for each of the last 2 years, and his offense is a big reason. We saw that throughout this series. This was in Game 2, a rocket from the right circle that gave the Americans a 3-2 lead. He would score in Game 5 a power play goal as well. His offense has been stellar. 5 points in this series. He is tied for 2nd among all ECHL defensemen in playoff scoring. But for David Mikowski, one of the factors that the Americans, I'm sure, are going to address with him, his 16 penalty minutes, which are tied for 3rd most in the ECHL in the postseason. And for David Mikowski, he was gotten off his game a couple of times during the Game 4 and 5 wins for the Steelheads. Again, the offense was still there, still dangerous at all times. He had 8 shots in Game 5, more than any other player on either team, but also 8 penalty minutes in Game 5, where the after-the-whistle extracurricular activities have gotten a hold of David Mikowski and have gotten a hold of the Allen Americans as a whole. We did not see the Americans retaliate. We did not see them get pulled from their game structure in Games 1, 2, or 3. They were disciplined. They were within themselves. They were very conservative. In Games 4 and 5, we saw them get lax on that, and in 3 instances, that lackadaisical mentality led directly to Steelheads goals, and in games where the Steelheads won 2-1 in Game 4 and 2-1 in Game 5, that's a very slim margin for error, something that certainly the Allen Americans, I'm sure, will look to address. For the Idaho Steelheads, again, their scoring has been just enough to get by, but in the meantime, the Steelheads still able to do enough offensively and enough defensively in front of Philippe DeRosier to get the job done. As we'll take a look at our St. Luke's Sports Medicine injury reports, and for the Idaho Steelheads, they have Will Merchant still out of the lineup after he got hurt in Game 3. He will not be in the lineup tonight. He is possible for tomorrow. Chris Martinet, Alexander Dahl, and Zach Bell all out of the lineup as well. For the All-American side, Zach Pachiro was ill for Game 5, did not play. He is back in the lineup for Game 6. Tristan King missed Game 5, was in Game 5. Tristan King will miss Game 6 and 7. He did not make the trip for the All-Americans. So Pachiro comes back in, Tristan King comes out. Alexander Carrier will also come out of the lineup as Miles Liberati comes back in. Now, Neil Graham talked a lot about the defensive structure for the Steelheads, how important that is, and that echoed resoundingly in Game 5 in the 3rd period, where again the Steelheads gave up 21 shots on goal. The Allen Americans were pouring on the pressure, but big block shots late in that 3rd period. Charlie Dodaro had 2, Corbin Baldwin had 3. That's what the Steelheads need in front of Philippe DeRosier, especially if they're going to make this a 7-game series, and if they can defensively pace the game in front of Philippe DeRosier. He's seen a lot of rubber. Steelheads have to manage the game in their own end tonight against an Allen Americans team that desperately wants to end this series tonight. We will step aside. When we come back, we'll have goaltending matchups, starting lineups, and the drop of the puck. It's Game 6, Idaho Steelheads and Allen Americans. Feel the Steelheads coming up next.